Hello my dear students, welcome to your Geography's online class. Today, we shall be dealing with the chapter Transport and Communication. The topics to be discussed today would be the land transport, mostly emphasizing on railways and roads. So when we talk about transportation, or if we have to define transportation, we simply mean it is a service that is provided that help us in moving passengers or goods from one place to another. So you can see as a transport meaning for the movement of goods and passengers. Now in this case, when we talk about communication as opposed to transport, communication is like also transferring of information, but you don't have to physically move from one place to another. But in case of transport, we find this movement happening from one place to another, basically for economic purpose. So this transportation is broadly classified into three different types. One is land, then the water and air. So the broad classification of transportation we see land, water and air. Land transport, water transport and air transport. So today's topic to be discussed would be land transport, on which we will be discussing basically roadways and railways for today's class. While land transport is of three different types: roadways, railways and pipelines. Roadways and railways are very common to us, and we understand how helpful they are in economic progress or development of a particular place. At the same time, these roadways and railways has also helped a lot in keeping in touch with our own relatives. So this is where we talk about an integration that has been maintained because of road transport and rail transport. While history is evident that how helpful they have been even during our fight for the independence of India. So we will be discussing about their advantages and disadvantages and the progress that has been made so far in the country, pre-independence as post-independence. So let's discuss road transport and rail transport. So first of it, let's discuss railways. When we talk about railways, then we surely understand that railways has been a lifeline to the country's economy, not just economy but also maintaining an integrity and keeping alive the sense of nationalism when we move from one place to another. So within a geographical limit, railways has done much more to India as being one of the largest employer in the country itself. So when we date back to the history, the railway was first opened in 1853 during East India Company between Mumbai to Thane. With almost a distance of 34 kilometers. So this is when railway started in India during the East India Company in the year 1853, with a distance of 34 kilometers run between Mumbai to Thane. Since then, there has been no looking back to railways, and at this date when we see that this railway has developed over the years, and not just limited to this 34 kilometers, but it travels to almost 14 lakh kilometers every day, carrying almost 110 lakhs of passengers and almost 8 lakh tons of goods. So on a daily basis, this is where it is happening in present time with the railways. We see that it almost travels 14 lakh kilometers of distance every day, with carrying almost 110 lakh of passengers and 8 lakh tons of goods. And this is only possible because of the expansion that railways has made over the years. Hence, we see that railways in India, which is one very important lifeline to the country, is considered to be the second largest networking of transport in Asia and is the fourth largest in the world. So this is where the railways has come over the years since 1853 with first laying of its track between Mumbai to Thane with only 34 kilometers. Now this distances that have been traveled in the country is only possible because of the various tracks that have been laid for the railway systems. So when we see this track, the tracks and railways that have been used is mostly categorized under three heads. One is known as broad gauge, then we have the meter gauge, and then we have the narrow gauge. Now this broad gauge, a meter gauge and a narrow gauge that we see, the three different types of tracks that is maintained in India. This is basically based on the gaps between the tracks. So here the gap is almost 1.7 meters rounded off, and then meter is exactly 1 meter, and then narrow gauge is we see almost 0.7 meters. So on the basis of this distance between the two lines of the track that we see, the three different forms of tracks have been maintained in India. One is broad gauge, then meter gauge, and then narrow gauge. Usually with the long distance running and heavy vehicles in the railway systems travel through broad gauge, and then in the mostly rural areas or in the less developed areas we find mostly meter gauge. And the narrow gauge in India is more or less not in practice. Well, we see that these narrow gauges are only used in those areas where the heavy railway systems cannot be practiced. For example, the hilly regions of Darjeeling or Shimla. So these three different tracks runs in India, which has helped for the Indian railways to run almost 14 lakh kilometers on daily basis, carrying almost 110 lakh of passengers and 8 lakh tons of goods. Now, when we talk about railway systems, sometimes we see that closed compartment mostly carrying passengers, and there are certain compartments which carries goods. So there is a basic difference between the compartments to whatever the railway system has. To what is that we call is, to the one that carries passengers, we call it coach. This is passenger carrier. And then we call wagon as goods carrier. So when we talk about coaches or passenger carrier, we very well know it as a common class traveling. We find it, or we even find sleepers berth, or you have ACs and non-ACs, all compartments where passengers are carried to what is we call coach. While wagon is mostly for goods carrier, and this goods carrier or the wagon can either be open or can be closed. And on the same, we see passengers, they pay certain amount of money or sum to travel a certain distance. So to that is we call fare. And then the others is like goods. For goods, we too pay something, and to that is we call freight. So these are very common differences between coach and wagon and fare and freight. Okay, fare is an amount paid for traveling by obviously passengers or an individual or a group. Then freight is an amount paid you can say freight is an amount charged for goods, for movement of goods. And so this is where we see a very basic difference between coach and wagon, fare and freight. Coach is passenger carrier, wagon is goods carrier. Fare is an amount paid for traveling, that is the railway is charging amount to the passengers, and then freight is an amount charged for transporting goods. Now, the railway system that is prevalent in India has a certain factor for laying its track, or you can say for railways to run across, there are certain factors that determines their setup. So, the first factor to be discussed is geographical factor. So, when we discuss about geographical factors, then we would very easily mean or understand that for setting up railway tracks or for laying of these tracks, plains are more suitable than the mountainous areas. We can say for setting up railway tracks as a geographical factor, flatlands or plains are more profitable and suitable in construction than as compared to the mountains, or you can say mountainous areas. Mountainous areas are very rugged and it becomes very difficult for laying of the tracks. And also in the mountains there are very sharp bends. Hence, through these sharp bends, high speed train cannot run. These may cause accidents, and hence plains are more suitable in constructions of railways. This as a factor is more profitable to the plains than to the mountainous areas, and hence this also is a disadvantage for railways, that they cannot reach high altitudinal areas, except to some cases that there are exceptional cases. But when we see railways running in the mountainous areas, then we mostly see the narrow gauge rather than the meter or broad gauge. Economic factor. So, economic factor, when we say this, then for railway it very easy is to understand that whichever is a place of economic importance, those places are very well connected by railways. While those places which are not economically important, then there comes a huge loss for the railways to be set up. So, in economic factors, so railways mostly connecting to those places, most of those places which has its economic importance. For example, it's a large agricultural areas or industrial areas, because here there is much movement of not just the passengers but also of the goods from one place to another. Now, last of it that we would discuss is political factor. When we discuss about political factor, it has been evident since the time of Britishers that railways were mostly connected to those places which is administrative areas, or politically those places where most of the administrations are carried out. So, in this regards, you would find that important cities and capitals are connected. Here in this case, we find most of the important cities and capitals are connected, where administration becomes very easy in that particular region. So, these are the factors that governs the setting up of railway tracks in India. Now, based on these factors, when we talk about the distribution of railway system in India, then we would find that North Indian plains are very well connected with networking system. In fact, they are one of the densest network that we have in India in terms of railways, because they provide a very good geographical factor, economic as well as political factor. Well, when we talk about the peninsular region is also very good in railway system, but provided not onto the high rocky mountains or rocky plateaus, because laying of tracks becomes very difficult in those areas. And when we talk about Himalayan region, in Himalayan region we find the rugged topography is a hindrance for setting up of railway tracks. So, that is the reason why we don't find much of the railway networks very well connected to these Himalayan region. Especially in case of northeast, if you understand it very well, then geographical factors in the northeastern region becomes a big hindrance for setting up of industries. One, because of steep slopes and rugged topography. The next is because of inaccessibility due to forests. And also northeast is not economically of so important, hence setting up of a railway is not that profitable in this region. Well, when we talk about the coastal region, the eastern coastal plains are very well connected with the railway system than as compared to western coastal plain, because western coastal plains are mostly rugged topography composed of hard and crystalline rocks, hence they do not facilitate much in movement of railway tracks. The next is also because they are mostly dissected plateaus where most of the rivers have been flowing through them. So hence, because of this dissected plateau, there has to be a lot of bridges and tunnels been constructed. Hence, western part is not much profitable in terms of constructions of railway tracks. Hence, eastern coastal plains we see a denser network of railway lines. Now, with the same progress happening in India with the Indian railway system, we find the newer technologies overriding the older technologies. So hence we see most of the steam engines are now replaced by other diesel engines or electric engines. On that note, we also have the modernization of Indian railway system, where we see the bullet trains have been introduced in India. The first bullet train was introduced in September 14, 2017. With a distance of running with 509 kilometers. The first bullet train was set up in India with a plan to be completed, a 5-year plan to be completed by August 15, 2022. So these are the newer projects that are coming in India with railway systems. And these railway systems has also operated very well in terms of connecting important cities and the mega cities of India, and hence that is where the formation of a diamond quadrilateral has been seen in terms of railway system. This diamond quadrilateral with the railway system is mostly connected to the important cities and mega cities of India. Now, when we talk about apart from these mega projects coming in India, or we can say the progress that have been made in the railway system, the railways in India certainly faces some problems, or we can even say the disadvantages of railways in India. So when we discuss about the problems or disadvantages of Indian railways that we see, the first one to be discussed, the major problem, is that it cannot operate in hilly terrains. So this is a major problem because India's land masses mostly comprises of rugged and hilly topographies with mountainous areas in the north and the Deccan Plateau in the south. So this is where it becomes difficult. The next is operating in 3 gauges causes hindrance in transshipment. So obviously not the entire part of the country has broad gauge. So moving goods from one place to another becomes a problem when there is changes in the track system, that is from broad to meter or either from meter to broad gauge. So this takes a lot of time, and hence perishable goods loses its quality. So the transshipment causes a big problem, as well as it causes delay in time. The next point, a delay in time, is related to the timings mostly maintained by the passenger trains in India. They do not reach the place on time, so that becomes a huge problem. With the passengers almost facing a huge problem themselves, it becomes also a problem of the Indian railways that they are unable to maintain their timings. Now, the biggest problem that we see, that railways do not provide door-to-door service, or they cannot provide door-to-door service like that of roadways. So hence, there is an upper hand of the roadways in terms of door-to-door service. Apart from these, the major thing that we would discuss is that the competition that Indian Railways is facing, mostly from the metros and also from the bullet trains that have been launched in India, the Indian Railways are facing a serious threat. So this is about the railway systems in India. Further, about roadways and the pipelines we will be discussing in the other classes. Thank you, and you all have a very good time.